You're listening to Big World Network.
Kai's Inquisition, The Blight of Shadowfall. Season 2, Episode 10. Written and read by Ton Perkowski. The group stood at the precipice, morosely contemplating the inferno blazing in the distance. Chajek scribbled hastily across his slate, "We cannot overcome an army." "We have no way of knowing whether any have answered to Daroth's call," Kai reminded him. "But we should assume that some have," Reynard countered. "This is looking more and more like a losing proposition. I don't bargain when I cannot win." As Pia and Jack added their concerns to the discussion, Kai felt her already slim chances of successfully completing her Inquisition dwindle. She suddenly felt hot, angry. Her fists clenched, and she ground her teeth together, glaring intimidatingly at the naysayers. "Yes, the beacon is troublesome," she snapped, "but the stakes are too high for failure. Do you honestly believe that you are exempt from Naderu's will? That we happen to be here, now, bearing the goddess's mark, each with our own unique talents, for no other reason than the winds of chance? I do not accept that. And I did not for a second believe any of you to be so gullible." "Not gullible," Pia said softly. "Pragmatic. We can't even be certain that either Daroth or the statue is in the fortress, let alone the number of combatants awaiting us inside." Kichi sniffed airily. "Let's just have a little look-see then, eh?" He plucked Zephyr from Kai's shoulder and began speaking to the creature in a warbling, squeaky voice. The pterodactyl snapped his head around and locked his gaze on the druid, hissing menacingly. His sharp claws drew blood as he clung to the old man's gaunt forearm, but neither seemed to notice. "What are you doing?" Kai demanded, more concerned that the fledgling might harm the man than the other way around. While Zephyr's size had only increased slightly, his features had further sharpened into those of the predator he would soon become, and despite his obvious affinity for the druid, predators were unpredictable. Kichi continued to prattle on, his light, watery eyes locked with Zephyr's cold, hard stare, and beckoned Kai closer with his free hand. As she approached, Kichi's hand shot out and gripped her forehead, emanating a dazzling, mossy green light where their skin touched. Zephyr's eyes flared with the same green glow immediately before Kichi tossed him up and over the cliff's edge, and Kai crumpled to the ground. Stunned, the others watched the pterodactyl tumble toward the sea, right himself, extend his wings, and then shakily transform his fall into a glide. With a few hesitant flaps, he climbed higher and changed course. After a few moments of testing his strength and balance, Zephyr flew back up and hovered, flapping crazily, just over the brink, level with the group. "Go on," Kichi waved his hands dismissively at him. "You know what to do. You can stop showing off already." Zephyr shrieked at him. Kichi rolled his eyes. "Yes, Kai is fine. Go on now, and be careful, little one." Pia hurried over to Kai and examined her. Still kneeling, she turned to face the old man and asked, "What have you done? She appears unharmed, but I cannot wake her." Kichi looked genuinely confused. "I did as you asked. You wanted a look inside the fortress, and I provided it." "How?" Reynard asked, clearly more interested in the method of gathering such information than Kai's well-being. "I strengthened the link between Kai and Zephyr, of course," he huffed. "As a favored acolyte of Naderu, Kai already has a connection to all of his creatures. Now she is able to see through Zephyr's eyes. I don't understand why you're so upset." He looked at Pia defensively and crossed his arms. She bit back a scathing retort and turned her attention to Kai. The Inquisitor slumped stiffly on the rocky ground, mouth loose as if gaping in surprise. Her breathing was strong, but rushed, as if with fear, excitement, or both. Her eyes glowed with an unnatural light and darted around randomly, obviously not seeing Pia, but something else entirely. Reynard brushed past Pia and the stricken Kai. "Well, we might as well set up camp while we wait. I'll check the perimeter. Chajek, care to join me? Maybe you can get some practice in with that crossbow of yours." A blur of gray, blue, green, brown, and black whizzed past Kai's eyes. The dizzying colors and shapes gradually steadied, reforming into an aerial view of the eye, Maelstrom's inner harbor. The perspective shifted slightly, and Kai could now see a leathery wing spread wide and being gently buffeted by wind she could not feel. "Is this a dream?" she thought. "A vision?" Once again the scene flopped and changed. Kai could now see the others standing on the cliff looking at her with expressions ranging from surprise and confusion to pride. Kichi's lips were moving, but she could not hear his words. It was only then that she noticed her own body, sprawled on the ground, senseless. Before the shock completely registered within her mind, the view swung up and away, finally settling into a rhythmic rocking, with the fortress crowned by the pyre looming dead center. "Zephyr? Can it be?" Kai guessed silently. She had heard of magicians and such being able to see through the eyes of their familiars, but she had never imagined it was something she would experience. It was odd, almost uncomfortable, to be restricted solely to the sense of sight. She could not feel the wind, hear it rush past, or taste the sea salt upon it. She had no effect on what she was able to see, or even in what direction she looked. She was nothing more than a passenger, and it made her feel helpless and vulnerable, two things an Inquisitor despised. As Kai came to terms with her situation, Zephyr reached the far side of the bay and began to circle the fortress, looking for any movement. With the exception of the fire, the building could have been deserted. There were no guards stationed at entryway doors, none walking the grounds outside, no one visible within any chambers with windows open to the night. Zephyr completed his first circuit of the building and swooped toward a balcony that appeared to open into a large central room. He zoomed toward it, but pulled up at the last moment when he caught movement within. He looped around and positioned himself so that he could hover just outside the window and peer in. A tall, handsome man, dressed in a flowing, blood-red, gold-trimmed robe, stood before a neatly formed contingent of twisted, nightmarish creatures, straight from the lesser planes. While there were perhaps only a few dozen, these soldiers looked well-trained and as deadly as they were hideous. Kai struggled to recall from her studies what these monstrosities could be, but her thoughts were interrupted when Zephyr suddenly turned from the window and flew up toward the tower topped by the bonfire. He only had to circle it once for Kai to glimpse the golden statue, along with 3 other golden artifacts displayed on black stone pedestals, within the uppermost chamber. She waited impatiently for Zephyr to return for a better look at the objects, but instead he swung around and put the fortress at his back. Kai screamed within her mind for him to go back, take another look, and perhaps even steal the smallest of the golden items. But it was no use. She could only observe. She fumed as Zephyr flew toward their camp, but once she calmed somewhat, she realized that the pterodactyl's movements were sporadic, as if he were struggling to stay aloft. The view dipped to the water, and she could see it creep closer as he slowly lost altitude. She once caught a glimpse of his chest and could see how labored his breathing had become. With a sudden spurt of effort, Zephyr set his sights on top of the waterfall above him and pushed to reach it. At the very end of his endurance, he managed to sweep up and over the cliff and fly right into Chajek, sending them both tumbling into the river.
You're listening to Big World Network.